Hello and welcome to the Brand Hunch podcast, where we explore ideas and hunches around how marketers are growing great brands. It's a look under the hood at how much is marketing science and how much is built on a hunch. In today's episode, I'm joined by Siobhan Hayes, Director of Marketing at Float.com. If you didn't know already, Float's the #1 rated resource management software, and as a business, they work async across more than 15 countries with more than 4,500 customers spanning 150 countries. Siobhan is based in Sydney, Australia, but manages a fully remote marketing team, as Float is a fully remote employer. We're a proud customer of Float here at Cello and really enjoy interacting with the product. I know employing a ton of creatives, that the user interface and the way that the product's designed has been a huge reason why we've stayed with Float for so long. I can't wait to hear more about your journey and how you've built such a great brand globally. Siobhan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Really exciting to be chatting with you in this capacity.
Thank you. So tell me a bit about your marketing career today. Where did it all start for you?
So I've always been in tech, somewhat accidentally. I studied marketing at university, but I also did tourism and hospitality as well. And as I was finishing up my degree, I was working part-time with a holiday rental company that was fully online. And fun fact is this business actually was on Airbnb's pitch deck because they were one of the first closed loop holiday rental offerings. So everything was managed through the website. And then they actually sold to Stays, which at the time was owned by Fairfax, who later sold to a US company, who later sold to Expedia. So I've accidentally always been in the startup journey very early on. So they were my original company. And then I did a couple of years in media and then found myself back again in fintech. So I was a founding member of a fintech team in marketing. I learned a lot through a lot of mistakes as well. And then in 2019, I moved to Float, which is in B2B. And I've been with them for the last 5.5 years.
And I feel like this is asking which children you love the most, but what would you say you love more, B2C brand work or B2B?
I think just based on how much I'm loving my role today and what we're building at Float, it's B2B. It's not where I expected to end up in my career, but I love it because I think also I get to bring that B2C mindset in some respects, just the fun and the brand part and connecting with people. And at the end of the day, we spend so much of our lives working, right? And so it's amazing. I think about bringing joy to our work lives more, and that excites me given how much of our day we actually spend working and the tools that enable us to do that.
So tell me a bit about what Float actually does.
So we're a resource management software. So where you might have your project management tool for perhaps listing tasks, you're assigning it to people. Float is about scheduling projects based on capacity. So you centralize all your people into Float like a database. So you add all your people in, when they work, what hours, what their skills and rates are. And then when you have a project come in, you use Float to book them onto that. So used mostly by creative services. So teams like yourself at Cello, a lot of creative agencies use us. But professional services is our broader market of who we serve. So anyone who's booking people's time onto project work, Float enables you to do that based on their capacity and scheduling.
When reflecting on the last 5+ years at Float, how much of your time leading marketing has been based on data and historical information, and how much of it has just been based on a hunch, on a gut feel as to how to effectively manage a high-performing marketing team?
Fun questions. So especially as we scale, being data-driven is essential. But in saying that, I think our superpower and our competitive advantage is the hunches we get, right? So it's about that intuition. So in all seriousness, I think it's both. We have to be data-led and hunch-driven. Every discipline comes with instinct. That's the way I see it. And in brand marketing especially, that instinct or hunch is fed by skills like being perceptive and being observant and close to the work. So talking to customers, our team in the market, and so on. At Float, we approach most things with an informed hypothesis. So it might be an idea backed by our why, ideally with data. And so we'll say, for example, based on whatever the observation is, we believe that X idea. And then we outline the expectations of that and what we need to see to believe it to be true. So it's a scientific approach, but it still begins with an instinct and a hunch. And as I mentioned, I really think of those hunches as our superpower. It's our competitive advantage, but the science part is what sets us up to scale and be accountable for the bets we make and enables us to execute better than anyone else, ideally.
So give me a bit of a lay of the land. Tell me a bit about when you joined Float sort of 5 years ago. What kind of business did you join and what was the focus?
So when I joined Float, it was about 14 to 15 people. We were fully remote. So I was living in New York at the time, and today we're over 50 people. So what was interesting, I guess, back then was I had come from a founding startup that there was only three of us. So when I joined Float, I was like, oh, this company's like really well resourced. They've got, a team of engineers building in-house. They've got some in-house product designers. And then as we've grown, we are like a lean team. We're self-funded, we're independent, we do it ourselves, but we're also profitable and growing. So I guess for me, what I've observed through that change is just those inflection moments from a team of like 14 to 15. And then once we hit over 20, you're starting to think differently. You're starting to think about the employee onboarding, how we bring folks on board, how we attract great talent. Over 30, the same thing. And now we're hitting over 50. It's really focused on how can we scale? How can we ensure that our processes are consistent across the business, build a great remote team culture? And we're competing in a bigger space as well. Like we're seeing mid-market teams are our growing customer segments. So how do we also ensure that we're building a brand that can compete at that level and stage with other businesses? So it's been a very exciting time in a short period of time.
Yeah. So when you started, I think you're the first marketing team member, is that right?
Yeah.
What kind of brand did you inherit from the 14, 15 people that were there at the start? And what have you grown from a marketing perspective?
Well, I think anytime you're in a startup, and if you're the first marketing hire especially, you're inheriting the founder's brand, which really just means the founder's vision and mission. So yeah, it was at the time, I guess, Glenn, who's the CEO, has a product management background. Lars, the other co-founder, has an engineering background. So it was very much around the product, which I think is natural and kind of required in SaaS. So a lot of my role back then, and still kind of is today, is that translating what's the product vision and mission, and what does that mean from a brand perspective? Like, how do we make this relatable? How do we make this actually connect with our customers and the audience beyond just what you can do with Float? So I would say that is what I've inherited. I'd say it's still very much what I work with, which is, I think, natural for this team size that we are still today as well.
And tell me a bit about the early days, the vision for this fully remote team. I think 5 years ago, pre-COVID, that's quite a radical way to approach managing a business. Where did that stem from?
Yeah, it's always been very common in tech. So Basecamp are a great example where they've been fully remote since day one as well. So for Lars and Glenn, it was very much a practical decision initially. They met in New York. They were working at an agency together. Glenn had moved back to Melbourne. So they were working remotely and apart anyway when they were building Float. And then it was talent. So they needed engineers to hire. New York rates were way too high when you're investing your own money and building a business. So they were hiring engineers in other places. And it also just made sense from a practical point of view. Like, we are a product building company. There's a lot of benefits that come with being remote and async. So in some ways, we're kind of like the 24-hour newsroom, but like product building room. There's someone always online and someone always building. It's a very intentional way of working as well. So a lot of our interaction is we're passing on work or collaborating in a continually like progressive way. So you're always moving work forward when you're online. It's less spent figuring things out, and then it's like, oh, it's 5 p.m. and we're all going home now. Like you really kind of in that deep flow and deep work state and moving work along. So it was very much a practical decision, as well as I think tech and the culture Glenn and Lars wanted to build in terms of high performing, focused work.
So give me the lowdown. What are the sort of pros and cons working fully remotely, specifically from a marketing team perspective? What are some things that you get to achieve that you think are outside of the standard work hours in an office? And what are the downsides?
So I would say the pros of that were very performance driven. So we do really foster a culture of having time for deep work, of driving work forward. There's a high attention to detail given to documentation, ensuring that there's a paper trail. Like, that's essential when you're working async remote, that someone can follow the decisions that were made and how we arrived here. So I'd say it's very productive. That's definitely a positive. It's also been amazing for the talent that we can attract. So we truly hire people based on merit, not location. I think it was 2021. I should probably check that being quoted on it. But we also removed location-based pay. So we actually pay everyone at Float the same rate, regardless of where you live. And that's indexed to San Francisco salaries. So that's amazing as well, that we've actually opened up the talent pool for who we can attract, and we're rewarding everyone for equal pay for equal work. The downsides are obviously things like building connection, ensuring that everyone has a sense of belonging, fostering those personal connections as well, like ways to build rapport with each other, build team camaraderie. In marketing, I've started to really think about this as we're building a global team and our team is growing. So introducing things like I have team readmes, we have our monthly all team sync. So at the beginning of every team sync, we play a little game to get to know each other. Our readmes cover things like how I like to communicate, how I like to give and receive feedback, what are signs that I'm stressed, what is a book or a podcast or a song that best represents me. So kind of mixing that, work style as well as personal. And we also once a year we meet in the world. So we have an annual team meetup, and once a year everyone at Float is flown into a location with accommodation provided for, and we spend 2 days to connect in real life. So last year that was in Osaka, Japan, and this year we're flying to northern Italy.
How amazing. What a great upside to fully remote work.
Yeah.
Logistically, back on the meeting with your team once a month and the parts that you do, whether it's video or phone call or in person, how much of that needs to be on a near time zone, or is it really completely, they can be based other side of the world?
Yeah, so for us, the actual work required of our roles isn't time zone bound. So it's different, for example, the support team or the customer success team. So I don't have any requirements on location with hiring. And then we really just kind of have to work with who we have based on how we can best negotiate and accommodate each other. So for me and my team specifically, I have one-on-ones with my direct reports. My one-on-ones at the moment are mostly based in Europe. So that can be a little tricky for time zones. So for me, it's in my kind of later evening, first thing in their morning. And then for our all team sync, we've still been able to make it work. So it's late for me. It's not ideal for me. It's like my 8 or 9 p.m., but that's okay. It's like once a month. So I think because we don't have a heavy meeting culture, it makes it easier to have those one-off exceptions, and you want it, right? Like we want to connect with each other, so it's okay. Versus if we were a heavy meeting culture, that would be very taxing to be able to accommodate those time zones.
Yeah, for sure. So a big part of my own experience in creative services has been around collaboration and brainstorm specifically around marketing related projects or kickoffs. And I've got a bit of a hunch that the industry often attracts sort of people. A lot of people that work specifically in marketing or in creative services is often quite creative and outgoing. How do you maintain that cohesiveness with people?
This is actually an interesting one because a big part of Float's growth, at first when we were a smaller team of 15 or less people, we were very engineering heavy. And obviously as we're bringing in the marketing team and we're growing other departments like sales and operations and customer success, we've really had to change some of our ways, and we're still very much working through that. So for me, I can speak for marketing. It's really about keeping my team in the loop. I know my team really want that. Like they want to feel connected to not just their own department, but the company as well. Like who are we working with? What does this mean? What's the impact of that? So for me, it's about keeping my team in the loop and also creating pathways for them to be involved. For example, I let them know about conversations happening in leadership, what's happening across other departments. I'll often copy and paste messages or take screenshots, and try and really create a culture of transparency with that. Of course, if it's not sensitive. And it's very much as well for marketing about promoting my team as partners with other departments. So trying to break down any barriers and foster collaboration for them to directly be partnering with other folks rather than it just needing to be through me. I guess the other thing that's really worth pointing out is we do have a dedicated people operations department. So we have a dedicated team experience manager in Amber. We have Sarah, who's our business operations, and we have a talent team as well. So our people operations department, led by Georgie, is responsible for fostering that collaboration, ensuring that we have a sense of belonging in the team, that everyone is connected. So there's a lot of intention and thought that goes behind it. I think the businesses and companies that kind of struggle with it is because remote is the second grade way to connect. Like it's the fallback. Whereas for us, we're remote first. So everything we do around collaboration, belonging, onboarding is remote first. So we actually get to bring all the stuff that you might do in office to a remote context.
This is maybe a bit more of a personal leadership style question. But sort of another hunch that I have is around trust and the importance of having and maintaining and growing trust with a remote team. How do you interview for that? What kind of traits, I guess, in the hiring process are you looking for that work well remotely?
I think for me as a leader, it's building trust in my team for them to know that I'm always leading with good intent. And I think things around transparency, being very open about conversations being had, is important. So I'm doing everything I can to break down silos. And also being honest with, any vulnerabilities I have or things that I'm thinking about. I'm really proud of, I guess, the radical candor we have in our team with feedback. We don't shy away from it. I use the phrase as well, often outcomes over ego. And I think that's really important. So in terms of hiring, I think we're quite fortunate at Float that how we work and the culture we have is reflected in our employer branding and in things like our Best Work Life blog. Our handbook is open so anyone can access it. We're transparent about pay. So we actually set the tone immediately from the moment a JD goes live. And then in the hiring process, rather than testing someone for trust, I'm actually trying to build trust through that. So, for example, I have questions asking people for feedback of like, what did you think about this? And I'm reminding them, I'm not looking for flattery, I'm looking for honesty. And I think that's a really great way to show how I want us to be working together rather than testing them of how do you answer this. It's about kind of building it throughout the hiring process.
Yeah, that's an incredible response. I think it's one thing to ask questions in an interview and then another thing to get into the nuts and bolts of working. And I think the way that leadership guides the day-to-day of an organization has a big impact on how people, it's like the parameters in which you turn up, what is applauded around here and what is completely not the right way to do things. One of the things I love about Float's brand and something that I was reading up on your website is around the What We Stand For promise. And in the words of Float's co-founder, Glenn Rogers, I'll just read it out. Today, I'm far more conscious of where I direct my money. I increasingly make decisions not only by the perceived value of a product or service, but by the ethics and actions of the people behind the brand. Not just the what, but the how. You don't have to look for today to see companies developing on the former, but failing miserably on the latter. So my question to you is, how well do you feel that Float lives out that promise, and how much of Float's brand is directed by the co-founders?
I love that you found that blog post by Glenn as well, by the way. I think for us, because we're independent and we're self-funded, we're profitable, we're growing, which is rare in SaaS. Like it's rare in our category as well. We have like the Mondays and the ClickUps that have raised over $100 million and with deep pockets. We really, to that point of delivering value and understanding the buying process and the decision-making process, we understand it because we're living it. Everything that we are doing is based on real profits. It's based on building a sustainable business. And I think that really guides how we work and drives how we make decisions. So it's a very natural evolution that comes into our brand and how we think about it and how we work together. I think about this in terms of like our stakeholders. It's our customers, our team, and the community. We don't have the kind of layered complexity of shareholder stakeholders and VCs and the likes of that. And I think the fair price part is really interesting because it boils down to delivering value. And we get it. We're a fully remote company. We use loads of tools that help us operate. We're self-funded and we know that every tool has a cost. And so it's expected to deliver a return on that. So I guess in a lot of ways, we're just saying that we're no different. We're no different to the tools that we're choosing as well, and coming always from a place of empathy and connection first.
What I love about it is that it's so human. You mentioned at the start, B2B SaaS is technically a business selling to a business. And in many ways, it's a business like Float selling to a business like Float. You're sort of in that mid-market space in which you, I'm sure, leverage lots of tools for different purposes that are SaaS tech tools. And so reading it through, and in Glenn's words, for me, the human element of brand has really come through. And it seems quite considered as opposed to just a blog thing that somebody's put online. It sort of feels like it's been really mulled over and considered, and it sounds from your perspective like it really flows through the business, which leads me to my next question, which is, how do you define brand and what do you think makes a great brand?
Love that. Yeah. So for me, especially, I guess I can speak from a SaaS perspective. I think of product is what are we building? What do we want the world to look like with this? And brand is why are we here? Why does this matter? I can think of like an analogy, like if you think of a spider web and at the center of it is your product, and it kind of has to be in SaaS, right? It's like, what are we building? What do we want this to kind of be? And then brand is like every thread of connection that keeps this web together. So what you actually see is a beautiful web, because without those threads connecting, it's just a bit of a hot mess, really.
I've never thought of it like that. And I love that because it also permeates so many different departments, people and approaches. And the touch points from where the web is hung perspective, the touch points are so varied. What do you think makes a great brand, and who do you admire?
I think great brands come down to consistency. So it's standing for something, the connecting the why, like why are we here? Why does this matter? And it's consistent, right? Like I think it's in some ways it's not rocket science, but actually being consistent is really difficult, especially as your team and your company grows and your product offering grows. And so brand is like always bringing it back to that, why does this matter? Why are we here? And then that being consistent throughout. So I think what makes a great brand is when you can't tell what is brand and what is product. It's the same thing to a customer. It's everything you experience. So a great brand is like when I receive an email and I know who it's from. Like it feels the same as when I'm in the product and I'm having this delightful experience, or maybe it's a terrible experience, right? And that's still consistent. But to me, a great brand is when you're building a consistent, delightful, enjoyable experience. And I think that's just essential. One that I think of that I've mentioned recently is Notion, because interestingly, I don't love their brand design. I don't love the illustration style everywhere. I think it's just not for me, but I have to give them credit that it's consistent. Even on LinkedIn, I see the people and I know that person works at Notion because I've got the same avatar. So they're building an amazing brand because it's recognizable, it's consistent with the product experience as well. It's just so intuitive and easy to use. It feels collaborative. And so they've brought that brand experience of what they stand for, collaboration, efficiency, productivity, into the product, into the brand design. Yeah, I think they're a fantastic example.
I agree. Erin Buss Institute talks a lot about distinctive assets and then consistency, whether it's customer or in this case, you're talking about holistic brand crossing employer through to external. And on that note, how do you think about employer brand from a marketing perspective? Does it fall into your remit? Is it separate? And how far do you go with that employer brand?
It's a fun question because we've had a lot of learnings here. So as product builders and in our categories, like in some ways brand building is a little bit difficult because early on we've really had to prioritize what are we leading with? Like what is float? What can I do with it? You're leading with that product message. And then at the same time, we've also been growing our team and trying to attract top talent, especially in SaaS and especially in those pre-2020 days when it was very hard to get great talent. So we kind of had to build an employer brand. I think for us, it's been very natural that what we do and how we work is very in sync. And that's just been quite organic. But in some ways, I guess like early on, it was a bit easier to build an employer brand than a product one because there's just lots to talk about and it's just an easy kind of place to go. But to answer your question, it's our people ops team who are the owners of our employer brand, you know, who own talent and hiring and the team experience. And marketing is the partner with that. So we partner with them, we collaborate with them to deliver.
And how do you translate brand through to more technical functions? How does that work when you are interrelating with engineers or really focused niche roles?
So one of our favorite expressions at Float, which I'm so glad that the team has connected with, is don't let your org chart show. So thinking about this, it means when it's really obvious that your email was written by someone not in marketing or elsewhere, or, you know, if your engineers are now all of a sudden doing product design. Like the reason we have a high performing team is because we're all specialists in our craft. And so we respect that and know that. So brand is driven by marketing. We're the owners of it. We partner very closely with design on it. And so by us really liking that don't let your org chart show, we understand as a business and across all departments that a great brand is a consistent experience. So the engineers know that, for example, some of our values around being simple, high performing, effective, you know, that comes through in how they build product, ensuring that the back end can host over 1,000 people, that we can host over 500 projects. Like they're actually delivering on that brand experience through their specialty. So I think for me as a marketing leader, it's about empowering folks to know that they're part of this, even though they might not be doing the front end. How do we speak about this in market? Which to be honest, they don't want to do. So we don't have to worry. We don't have to negotiate on that, but we're all delivering on this brand experience through our specialties and through our crafts.
You've mentioned before about brand sprints. Tell me a bit about what that means to you.
Being an async remote team means that we're not all online at the same time. So we do a lot of collaboration work in an async capacity. So we ran a brand sprint earlier this year, and that was to get to our brand story and narratives. And so we use tools like, for example, FigJam. So that's been a game changer. So Figma but the Fig Jam is like for the non-designer versions. And I do a lot of our retros through Fig Jam as well. How we do it is like we'll often time box a period. So for the brand sprint that we ran, I time boxed a period. I had specific questions because, again, when you're building a brand, it's all about alignment. You want to ensure that we're all on the same page. So I had an input from Glenn in terms of what's our company vision, what we're building, our product vision. And then I had key questions to help inform what our story should land on. And that was all done async through Fig Jam. I had boards set up and people can add post-it notes. And the best bit is because you can come in every day and visit that, you're actually ideating on it over time with each other. You're getting to upvote specific inputs. You're getting to have discussion around it. And I personally find that it can be a very intentional experience and you get a lot more juice out of it than what you might be able to do in like a 1 hour live meeting, because people are actually ruminating on these ideas. They're thinking about it. You have time to challenge your own ideas as well and hear from other folks.
Yeah, I've never stopped to think about that from a fully remote perspective, the time to ruminate on, do I really agree with that? I think it's one thing in a meeting to put out an idea and another thing to be challenged on it and to go away and think about whether that still stands true. And I'd hazard a guess that if you come back and it still stands true, you probably have a deep conviction. And if it doesn't, then maybe there's a better way to articulate or, reimagine the statement.
I think as well, it can take the pressure off the moment, because I think often when you have ideas that, maybe you've thought about for some time and you're getting the first opportunity to voice those, it's easy for some of your own biases or ego or goals to come into that you want your idea to be the right one or you want to convince everyone of it. Whereas I think when you kind of remove some of those time constraints in some way or those live in the moment constraints, one of my favorite expressions is outcomes over ego. And I think there's that space to allow for that you accept this is a process.
You're also taking out the loudest person in the room getting their way, which is not always, about a poorly intentioned thing, but we see in brand workshops often the loudest person, which can often be in a sales or marketing or senior role, by virtue of volume, outpaces other views in the room. And I think when you're democratizing that in a Fig Jam space with post-it notes, everyone's voice is the same because there's no audible voices, which I think levels the playing field too for other roles in parts of the business that might not be as loud by volume.
Exactly.
Tell me a bit about your marketing remit now. You've obviously moved from a marketing role of one into having core specialists that work alongside you. How have you navigated that change and how do you manage the different marketing streams?
So today our marketing team covers the functions of brand, content, product marketing and growth. And I have specialists in the latter three. So I oversee and lead brand, and my role is about bringing it all together. So ensuring that our marketing aligns with the business goals and partnering with specialists to achieve that. So it's about guiding the strategic direction and integrating marketing throughout the business, keeping our team on track and empowering them to drive us forward. A favorite quote that I actually wanted to share, because it is a real shift, I think, when you've come from being a hands-on person and in a manager role to then a director role, is the mindset shift for every director is to stop looking at your team's priorities in the context of the organization and to start looking at the organization's priorities done in the context of your team. And when you sit with that for a minute, you'll realize that you're not just looking out, you're actually looking out and up and across, not just within your own team. You're looking as much out as you are internally. And hiring the right specialists is just so key to that, like having the right people in the right roles and setting them up to execute. And when you hire the right people, it's easier to take a step back because you know that they've got this. And so for me and my team, like I love hiring people who are specialists and know their function better than I do, right? Like I'm a generalist. That's kind of why I'm in this position, because I love bringing it all together and seeing how it all fits. But I want to hire specialists who know it better than I do and are smarter than I am in that field, because that's why they're here. We can do better work.
A question that I have around employer brand is that I've got a bit of a hunch myself that I think employer brand will continue to see a bit of a rebrand itself in the years to come. I think it's potentially been seen as the poor cousin and definitely secondary to our customer brand and the external brand being a bit cooler. But, in the world where great talent is so hard to come by, and we not only want to attract but retain great people, I think the brand application to internal comms and internal ways of working will only increase and I think become more of a focus, encouraged and championed by marketing, even if marketing's not owning employer brand. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like this because it kind of comes back to what I shared earlier around overarching brand story being about empowering better decision making. And the reason this really works for us is because Float as a tool, that's what it does, right? Like you're making better decisions around who should be working on what projects, what people do I have, what can we take on. And then that also reflects in how we work as an async remote organization. It's about great decision making. So, decision making to things like we can actually choose our own hours. So because we're async, I'm not bound by a 9 to 5. I'm contracted on a 40-hour a week. I can choose what hours work best for me. When can I do my best work? So that again is that decision making where because of how we work, our culture being async remote, there's actually a lot of responsibility with that on individuals to know where do you work best? Is it in an office? Is it at home? Is it at a different location? When do you work best? What hours are that? How do you work best? What are the best forms of communication for you based on your skill sets, your teams, whether it's sending a Loom, whether it's a Slack message, whether it's documentation. Every moment we're making decisions for how we work together and how we can deliver. So I think that's been the thing that's really worked for us in terms of we're really now thinking about how this comes together. Like we don't want our employer brand to be so separate or different from our product brand. It should connect and it should be sharing the same values and alignment of what this means and why we're here and why we're together.
At Cello, we talk about clarity, cohesion, and confidence. And I guess it's that cohesion piece that it all sort of makes sense so that you can turn up consistently in every touch point because it's clear on direction and everyone's on the same page regardless of role. When you think about your own leadership style and your own team, one of the potential cons of working remotely is the sort of bleed of work into life, but too far that you're working all the time. How do you personally set those boundaries and how do you establish those with your team?
That's, I think, when I'm always practicing, especially I think when you love what you do, it can be hard to stop, right? Especially when you get the choice of you can do it at any time. So there's a few simple things like we don't have expectations that folks are responding to messages when they're not meant to be online, when it's outside of their regular working hours. When my team takes time off, I'm telling them uninstall Slack. Like we don't reward a culture of being online when you're not meant to be. That's meant to be your switch off time. And I think that's just such a simple thing that makes a big difference. And I feel that in myself as well as a leader of what am I showing my team? So if I'm on holidays, I will not be online. And I'm very clear about that, not just for my own sanity, but also because I don't want to be modeling that for my team, that I'm showing that that's how we work. It's not how we work. It's not what we believe in. And then culturally, a fun thing that we do as well is at the end of the year, we have a week called No FOMO Week. And it's a week where actually the whole company is outside of support and like essential services. For the most part, most of our company are offline. And we do that deliberately because we know that also when you take things like leave or you're not working, you can get FOMO and you don't know what you're missing out on. The other one is like Slackxiety, where you're anxious about how many messages you're going to be returning to. So we have this dedicated week where everyone is offline. So we're not creating that anxiousness of what you might be returning to or the work building up while you're offline. We're all offline together.
Yeah, incredible. I love the idea that setting a pace as a leader or a senior person in a business, I think, is amplified when you are in moments of personal leave or time out yourself. I think it says so much when you're setting the expectations that you have with yourself and your team, non-verbally saying, this doesn't fly, and so I'm logging off myself. What are your thoughts on brands for each stage of growth? I know you mentioned at the start about moving from a founder brand into a more expansive brand. What have those growth stages look like for you?
So I believe that brand is essential at the beginning of a business's journey. But even, for example, if you don't have an in-house marketer or you're not working with a brand consultant, you're still doing brand, even if that's subconsciously. There's a reason that you believe in what you're doing, and that's coming through as you're building your business. So I don't actually have a rigid answer on how to approach brand for each stage because it depends on many things. For example, how mature is your category? Therefore, how aware are folks that a solution exists? Who are you competing with and what do your customers care about most right now? So I think actually it all just comes down to strategy and timing.
And finally, what's been your secret sauce for building a great brand?
Alignment and consistency, they're just the two must haves. So, alignment is the unlock to building a consistent brand experience. It starts by partnering with leadership, usually the founders, and translating their company mission into a brand vision, and then building out from there. So keeping everyone in the business aligned so that together you're committed to this ideal, consistent experience. So in my view, that's how you get the buy-in, and buy-in is essential for building a great brand.
Incredible. I have learned so much about Float, but also how you've managed to scale a marketing team remotely across regions. I feel a lot more excited by the possibility of remote work with all the opportunities and upsides to, I think, coming into this chat. I saw a lot more of the downsides, and you definitely showed me what's possible and running your team so well. It's really inspiring. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
My biggest takeaway from this chat with Siobhan was how she was talking about interviewing for trust, which was my hunch going into the conversation. You need to be interviewing to be able to ascertain if you can trust someone and how you might trust them in the future. And I love flipping that on its head and the way she thinks about not necessarily testing for that in the interview phase, but providing a framework and a place in which people can provide useful feedback, not just flattery. And I definitely am reflecting on my own conversations with my team and giving them opportunities to answer in an honest and interesting way that allows all of us to perform better.